What's up? It's Mike Mal, and you are listening to the Athletor Podcast, where we dive into the processes, mindsets, strategies of some of the most successful athletes and coaches from all walks of life. Hey, it's Mike. Athletor Podcast is coming at you. We are talking this week with Jason Bryant. Now, if you don't know who Jason Bryant is, you've probably been living under a wrestling rock for the last 30 years. But the dude is all things wrestling media. We get into how he started in the sport, and we also get into ways that we all think that we can improve the sport, but nobody's really doing right now. Plus, you'll be really interested in his fourth person on his Mount Rushmore. All that and more coming back at you. Athletor Podcast. Athletor Podcast coming at you, and I put on my sexy radio voice for the number one guy in radio, in wrestling, Jason Bryant. Thank you so much, man. Thank you for coming out and spending some time with us.
Well, I'll have to do the fake radio voice for you. Mike Malinconico coming at you live from the Jersey Shore, where you locked kids into a room for 20. No, we're going back in time because Mike was actually on my show. Geez, what were we talking about? 20. So was before the Worlds in 15. So we're talking about 10 years ago at this point.
Sure.
So, but yeah,
that was a long time ago. That was a many lifetime. I look back on that time in my life, and my wife and I laugh about it now. At that point, I was traveling around the country and not just doing wrestling camps, not just covering events for, me from a media aspect, but also doing those 24-hour lock-ins. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, just Google my name and 24-hour lock-in, and some of the shenanigans I'm sure will pop up somewhere.
I think that was it was featured on Vice, wasn't it?
It was. Vice did a story on us. Funny story about that. They sent out two people to cover the event, and one was female, one was male. And the male was effeminate, as we said. And I looked at him right away, and I'm like, this is going to take some doing to get him through this. Like, this is going to take a lot of coaching. This will be my grit. And he quit about 15 hours in, and I'll never forget what broke him. It was, we call them gorilla runs, and you take a 45-pound plate and you're doing bear crawls with the 45-pound plate in your hand. And
it does not sound pleasant at all.
Oh, like I could see him. Jason,
I might quit watching him. I might quit watching people do this.
I remember, I knew in the moment, like, he was really close, and I knew if I pressed on the gas there, like if I went into full Coach Mike mode, that would not be good. But I think I made a mistake of going a little too soft on him. Like, I was encouraging him, and I'm like, look, this is why you're here. Like, you got to understand, like you're here because of this breaking point. And now he made it through that workout, but he seized up, like his back seized up, and he just laid there on the ground for about 45 minutes. And I'll never forget, he came upstairs. We were in this like dungeon area of a wrestling room, as most wrestling rooms are, as you know. And sure enough, he like had this awfully embarrassed look on his face. And he was like, and I'm like, you don't have to say it, dude. I'm not going to make you say it. It's fine. You want to get out of here? He's like, no, I'm going to stay, write the story and that kind of stuff. But the girl, she absolutely crushed every workout and then some. She absolutely killed it. But yeah, looking back on that time, it probably took a bunch of years off of my life.
I don't know. I remember discovering your podcast, your OG podcast,
OG wrestling,
one that's you're probably not putting on too many resumes these days. Like I'm listening. It's like you're talking to Joe Dubuque about the kids, and I mean Joe's kids are like probably tiny then, probably not even wrestling yet. And I'm just like, and you're talking about kids. I was like, this is the most refreshingly abrasive thing I have heard in a long time. So that was my first discovery into Mike Mal, was just randomly searching wrestling podcasts on Apple iTunes and like, oh, see how many there are. There was like 6.
Yep.
And it was like, what is this? This guy's got his laptop open. He's recording his computer. Can you fix your audio? This is great.
Yeah.
I remember those years. And then the time you dropped the F-bomb on the podcast, like, I can't believe it just cursed on your podcast, man. I'm so sorry. I even cut it out for you, but early or it's old school, man. That was and then we actually met at the beach games. I mean, we'd run into each other periodically. We didn't know each other.
Sure.
You told the story though about JUCOs one year, NJCAs in
Mm,
Rochester,
yep.
where J Rob called me a bigot in front of a table of all these coaches. And he did it. He was, J Rob, he'd tell a story and to get the
Sure.
anecdote and he bait you and he got me to answer the question. Well, then you're a bigot. And I'm like, and I'm just dead.
Dang it.
I had nothing. Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
he got me. But yeah, I remember you telling that story. I'm like, wait, shit, Mike Mal was there? I
Yeah.
totally forgot about that. So yeah,
Well, it was I remember it because, as you know, J Rob can hold some court, right? And like, I'll never forget that moment because it was me and my two assistant coaches. And anyone that's been to JUCO Nationals, it's
and this is
not,
when you were at Middlesex, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I was at Middlesex, longest 8 years of my life. Um, but the JUCO Nationals are not the spectacle that NCAA's are every year. It is it's still a cool event. Don't get me wrong, like it is a cool event. But there was a hospitality room and it was sparse at best. I think it was like two donuts and black coffee. And my coaches were like, "Let's go up to the hospitality room. I want to get something to eat. I'm starving." I said, "Okay." We all go up there and there's J Rob holding court. And I do vaguely remember the bigot thing, but that's not what stuck in my head. What stuck in my head was he was holding court about.
Hey, don't go anywhere. It's Mike. We'll get back to the podcast in just a second. We got to pay the bills though. Do you have an athlete that's looking to break into the social media space? We at athletorlive.com have a brand new in-depth tutorial done by none other than Caden Henshaw. If you don't know who Caden is, he's not even a Division I wrestler, yet he's got hundreds of thousands of engaged followers. Learn how to create engaging content, grow your followers, and open up new opportunities in the NIL space. Go to athletorlive.com/Caden and we'll give you the first module completely free.
Ways to market wrestling. And was I hungry at that time? Yes, of course. It was probably 4 or 5 p.m. and I hadn't eaten all day. And my coaches were like, "Well, there's no food here. It's just like 2 donuts and a cup of coffee. Why don't we go find something else to eat?" I'm like, "Y'all go ahead. I'm going to sit here and listen to J Rob just drop knowledge." I mean, because I was a young coach at the time, just drop knowledge on the ways to market our sport. And maybe that's kind of the direction that we go today, man, because I think we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot, Jason. We kind of shoot ourselves in the foot at every turn. Um, let's get your perspective on the way that because here's the thing, right? Like you and I are not directly involved in the sport of wrestling anymore. I don't really coach very much. I help out a little bit at Poway. I don't do anything other than just train a couple kids. How do we evolve this sport? Because look, man, I know you're hearing the same things that I'm hearing. NCAA wrestling is going to look different very soon.
That's the word. And the one thing I think that's hard about that question is we're not driving the bus. Wrestling
Right.
is not driving the bus with college sports. Our coaches association, we can't really plan ahead because we don't know what's next. This House versus NCAA thing, the rules are changing overnight. Right now, with the guy that's going from Wisconsin to Miami on the football side, we're like, wait, what? We just had that with wrestling with Zach Glazier just saying, all right, I'm going to enroll at South Dakota State without entering the transfer portal. We're finding like, wait, that was a thing, you could do that, and we don't know the rules. That's the thing. Nobody knows what's happening from one day to the next. So for a sport to try to take a position, I think this is any, and I hate the term non-revenue.
Mhm.
And I hate the term niche slightly less.
Mhm.
Olympic tends to fit most of them. So let's use
Sure.
Olympic
Okay.
and
Olympic
yeah,
sport.
Olympic
Mhm.
sports. And, we use that for what it is. And they can't really plan ahead. because they don't know what's going to happen, because most of the Olympic sports are hung up on what's football going to do, what's basketball. They're the ones driving the bus. They're front seat, they're driving in their shotgun. They decide when you're getting off to go to the bathroom. We're in the back going, hey, we really got to go. Guess what? Sit back and wait until we pull over and tell you when. That's where we are at as a sport. That's where volleyball's at as a sport. That's where tennis is as a sport. That's where track and field is. So what we need to do, we don't know. That's the problem. We can set out all these contingency plans, but we don't know which one's going to happen. And then something's going to happen with some walk-on football player. Colorado just sued for to keep walk-ons or something like that. Mm-hmm. That's the new one that's coming down the pipe this week. And it's like, how are we going to react? We have to respond. You know, the shot is this, we're so reactive to everything. Right now, nobody can be proactive because none of us hold the cards. So the question is what direction we're going.
Well, can I pause you there? Can I pause you there? You're not wrong. You're not wrong. It is very, very difficult to be proactive at this point. I understand that completely. Mm-hmm. Are there steps that we probably could have taken in the last 10 to 12, 15, maybe 20 years that would have helped our cause?
I can think of one right now.
Tell me.
That is what happened this past week with NCAA finally having women's wrestling as a championship sport. I went back and looked at this on another show that I did with Matt Stats, which is our NWCA show where we talk about different statistics and apply them to wrestling. You go back and look at the participation numbers in 1972, before there were really girl sports anywhere. You look at the sports that adopted the girls into the sport. Oh, girls can play soccer. Girls can play basketball. Girls can play. We were one of the last people saying girls don't wrestle. This is a man's sport. We were one of the last sports to do that. And look what happened. You have 300,000 boys playing soccer. You have 300,000 girls playing soccer. We left half of our potential sports base behind. And then women's have had a world championship since 1987. We've been participating since 89. I think my years are right there. Mm-hmm. And only just now we're still got states that don't have high school wrestling 30 years later for girls. So if we would have not been this whole it's a man's thing, or having that male ego bravado about women's wrestling 35 years ago, when everybody else, all the soccer coaches, and they were creating softball, and we were creating all these other opportunities that the boys had, and we're saying, okay, and I'm not talking about Title IX with the college sports. I'm talking about at the fields outside in your park. What are there? There's soccer fields. Who plays on them? Boys and girls. We kept the wrestling mats away from the girls for so long. Sure, they can be a mat maid, they can be a cheerleader, they can be a manager, but that was it. I mean, back in the day, the girl wrestling was the freak show story. That was like, you were like, oh no, that's look at her. And that's the one thing. If we would have done that 30-something years ago, and again, it's all anecdotal, I don't think we'd have lost the amount of college programs that we've had across the board, Division I all the way down to the NAI and junior colleges. I think we'd have more girls that were willing to put their girls into a combat sport. I think by and large, women's MMA would have exploded even bigger than it is now. I think there's a lot of things that could have happened if we would have not been so stuck in the mud 35 years ago to say, no, the girls are over here. Boys only, boys wrestle. Terry Steiner says it too, that the sport's so great. It teaches us a lot of things. Why do we keep it from half the population? So that right there, in hindsight, 30-something years ago, we really should have embraced the girls then and there. We're kind of making up for the sins of our fathers at this point. The NAI had a championship sport now for 3 years. The NCAA obviously being the big blue disc. That's what moves the needle. But that's one thing I can look at, because then you would potentially double the amount of fan base you have that are now 30 years into it. I joke that nobody's grandma wrestled. We're almost getting out of that. I mean, I think Trisha Saunders, I don't know if she's got grandkids yet, but Christy Davis.
We're close.
We're close to that. Whereas like Jake Pataxel, for example, his grandfather was an NCAA champion in the 50s. So we lose a generation in a sport that's familial based. Like, nobody in my family wrestled. I'm an outlier with that. Whereas a lot of wrestling families, your brother wrestled, your uncle wrestled. There's a tie in. Adeline Gray's uncle wrestled. That's where she got into it. So we look a lot of that. Those are some things that I can look at. It's like, is that a butterfly effect? If we would have just, some of these, we know our old coaches were old grizzled veterans that had old school, values, I guess is the word they use. There's nothing wrong with girls wrestling is blowing up now. Imagine if we'd have had that 30 years ago. I think that's the things I look at.
I would tend to agree with you. Here, you brought up another point, and this is something that really, really bothers me about our sport that I don't know why we're not better at this. You brought up, well, we could have lost out on a potential fan base. I don't think we do a very good job as a sport of keeping a fan base. Like, think about how many kids wrestle. Like, I'm sure you have the statistics, the NFHS.
Yeah, about 270,000 each. Look at it. It's a group of 4 years. Ninth
Right.
grade. Just at any time, there's usually about 260 to 275,000 boys wrestling. Just boys.
That's just boys. Okay. We're just talking about boys. Why can't we keep half of them? Why can't we keep half of them? I know every kid that played football, in Pop Warner, at least half of them are NFL fans. I know every kid that played Little League Baseball, at least half of them are Major League Baseball fans. Why is it that we can't keep at least half of our fan base that participated in and we all love to trumpet that it's the greatest sport in the world. It teaches you so many values, and it's great for hard work. Why is it, in your estimation, that we can't keep a fan base into adulthood? It's really it bugs me, man. It really bugs me.
I think that's a real good question too, and I don't have an answer. I have a couple of different theories and things that kind of lead to it, kind of like where what led to my rant there about women's wrestling. Sure. Is, again, let's go back in time. Sins of our fathers in this case. I guess that'll be my theme in some respect. Like, how was our coaches treated? Like, I did not wrestle very long. I had a hard-nosed coach who came under a hard-nosed coach. We had 3-hour practices. It's some of those things, like it's hard. The sport itself is a hard sport. So right then and there, it's not an enjoyable experience for most people. There's the people that have success and that are good at it, that naturally take to it. It's fun for them. Of course, winning is fun. Mm-hmm. Getting your face beat in is not fun. Then add to that cutting your butt off in the old school ways that they used to cut weight. Now, I mean, unfortunately, it took 1997 that was my freshman year in college, where we had those 3 college wrestlers die to really change, or else we might be gone, kind of thing. And that was another seminal moment in the sport that often gets overlooked. And a lot of our old school coaches complain about the paperwork. It's too much paper. Even my coaches at my high school, not my high school coach, but coaches thereafter, like, it's all paperwork. That paperwork serves a purpose. Yeah, it needs to be fine-tuned. Now a lot of it's digital, but the way you dropped weight, or the way it was not, okay, you got to go down this many weight classes. That old mentality of cutting weight, I think, really burned people out. You look at some of the guys that we see in nationals right now, they might be 55 years old, and some of them are just battered and broken because of all the years of doing it wrong. Sure. I'm not saying what is being done now is the best, but it's
markedly better. Safer. Markedly better.
And thing is, we're still fighting. Even like Jocko had the tweet yesterday about, have all your kids wrestling. And right there was a response like, oh, I'm not getting my kids into wrestling because of all the extreme weight cutting. Though that's, 1997 was 28 years ago. Mm-hmm. We've had those safeguards in place for almost 3 decades, and we still fight, again, the sins of our fathers in a lot of cases, on how they were taught. And then maybe it's the sins of our grandfathers or something like that. But it's like the mentality of how we cut weight, how we drop weight. Oh, you got to go down, cutting down 27 pounds in a week, kind of these horror stories. They might be the outlier, but those are the stories that get retold. Thankfully, like for my career, for example, which really wasn't very big. I think you can write the whole thing on a Post-it note. I never wrestled a varsity match, but going in wrestling, I started in the summertime. I didn't have to worry about the weight cut. Plus, I was a bigger guy. I probably wasn't going to have to cut, but I found it to be fun. And then I was hooked on it by the time I got my face beat in. And then I realized, oh, this is a good workout. I got in the best shape I've ever been in my life to this day. I was not as in good a shape as the short time I was in that wrestling room at Pocosin Middle School, right behind the middle school. And again, it was not a, I don't want to say like actually active wrestling was a life-changing experience for me. Being around the sport was. And I think that's where we lose, to your point, is like we lose the aspect of what they loved about wrestling it was drowned out by just the severity of the weight cut, the beating up. Okay, most of these people, they're not going to call. Where's the coach in this? Are they going to send them to a Division III school so they can enjoy their experience, or are you sending them D1 or bus where they get burned out even more when they go to college and they don't ever want to step on a scale? They'll go to the doctor. Greg Warren jokes about it. I'm 50-something years old right now. Doctor says you have to stand on that scale. No, I don't. Bet you I don't.
I don't.
Pat Tofty, my coworker at the NWCA for a long time, wrestled 118 at Brown. Notorious weight cutter guy, was chiseled like a bodybuilder. For even 5-6 years ago, I still haven't stepped on a scale. And his college career ended 30-some years ago. So I think all those factors, the hardness of it is one thing, but the hardness and the brutality that took the toll on your body from the generations before us really kind of eradicated them. The hardcore stayed around. But your casual, I wrestled once. It was cool. Yeah. Have no desire because it just left a bad taste in their mouth. And I hate to believe that it's 70% of the, not even more than half of those people that did it were doing it because it was something to do. I feel like football coaches always preach that it's great for your offensive linemen. We see that in practice. The pudgy heavyweight that comes out as a freshman is a much better offensive and defensive lineman by the time he's a junior if he's wrestled for 2 years. Sure. Anecdotal, we can't put an actual value on it, but the proof is, that passes the eye test. Sure. So I just feel like the old methods of the past from a physical standpoint were really more of that undoing of people sticking around.
Yeah. And I think the culture has changed enough that I think this generation will stick around a whole lot more. I think we can, we can talk about the sins of our fathers all day long, but here's the thing that I think changed the most. And tell me if you think differently. I think that there is much more, and this is for good. There are drawbacks to this as well. There are drawbacks to this. I think that there is much more professionalism in youth wrestling now than there ever has been. Now, well, what does that mean? Well, that means that those negative experiences that kids traditionally had and associate with this sport, the overbearing dad, which a lot of times wound up being the coach, right?
That's youth sports. That's not just wrestling a thing.
For sure. But I'm saying that I can remember nightmare dads that would just, elbow their way into a point of power in their local wrestling room and wind up being their overbearing dad. And that overbearing dad becomes overbearing dad and coach to X amount of wrestlers in the stable that they have. But now it's like, oh no, there's guys like David Taylor up until fairly recently was a youth coach basically, right? I mean, you got Kyler Sanderson, who was just on the podcast. He's a youth. These are high level wrestlers. Daniel Cormier is as high of a level wrestler as you can get. And he's running a youth club. He's teaching at a high school, or not teaching, but he's coaching at a high school. So the professionalism in coaching becomes, no, we're not going to cut weight at 8 years old. No, we're not going to do that. And we're certainly not going to cut a ton in high school so that you never want to wrestle again. Ben Askren won't let his kids wrestle on national schedule until he's they're in 6th, 7th grade. Like, he won't let them. Why? Because you only get a specific amount of those matches in you. Every human body has a finite number of hard matches in them. You want to burn them all by the time you're 15? Is that what we're looking to do? So I really think that the influx of young, motivated, and knowledgeable coaches has really changed the direction of the sport. And things that we're doing with the P&L. I think I don't know that this is something that's under wraps. And if it is, well, then cat's out of the bag now, but we're going to get away from weigh-ins altogether on site. What we're going to do is the American Scale Company is providing us with these incredibly elaborate scales. Every kid that wants to compete in our events has to weigh in 3 times a week, because that's generally what these youth kids are going to practice at their clubs 3 times a week. Okay. and you have to weigh in, and everyone has a QR code. You beep your QR code, you step on the scale, and if you come to our event and you're not within 3 pounds of that walk around weight, 8th grade and under, you're not wrestling, bud. You're not wrestling. So we will have months of data on these kids. Weight, and more than just their weight, like their body composition and stuff like that. And we'll know where their optimal weight is. And I think that if we can keep a lot of this, the weight cutting, especially out of the youth level,
Mm-hmm.
because let's be honest, right? All those negative things that you're talking about, the hard practices, the brutal weight cuts that we all went through, you're talking about them at a high school level, but really it's the lead up. I was in plastic bags at practice in 6th grade. Like I slept in plastics in 7th grade. And
I'm
by the
thankful I
time,
didn't discover wrestling that early to experience that type of thing.
yeah,
I
for
missed.
sure.
I did not experience that type of stuff. So,
But you see what I'm saying, right?
I've
Like
seen
it's
it
the
though. I have seen it.
cumulative effect, right? I mean, it's the cumulative effect of all these things for all these years. And look, I was out of the sport for a minute. There was like a year and two years where I mean I had just gotten both shoulders done, both knees done. My college career was over before it even really started. And I'm going, what am I doing? I'm 22. I think I was 22 years old. I'm like, I'm done. I'm done. And a buddy was like, do you want to come back down to the state tournament? I said, absolutely not. And it was the state tournament up until that point, even when I was in college, we would try to make a trip down there because it was fun. It was in Atlantic City, and Atlantic City was kind of a cool town at that time. It was you get to see everybody again. It's just like the NCAA tournament is now. I was like, no, I'm not freaking going. There's no way. And I'm lucky because I've chosen to make this silly sport my career. That my high school coach asked me to come back to a local tournament one time, and then one of the kids who was wrestling, it was a little youth tournament. One of the kids that was wrestling in that event happened to be Scott Winston. And Scott Winston, whose dad came up to me, Psycho Dad, I love him to death, Mr. Winston, if you're listening, which I know you are. Okay. He comes up to me, and I'll never forget how he introduced himself. He's like, hey, you wrestled at Oklahoma State, right? I'm like, yeah. He's like, yeah, I wrestled at Penn State. I'm like, really? He's like, oh, wait, that was a state pen. Never mind. Hey, this is my kid right there.
Maybe the most Jersey introduction ever.
It is. He was all Jersey. But I started training kids, and then the clubs, and then blah, blah, blah. But the point is, right, I was out, and I wanted nothing to do with it. And if it wasn't for my high school coach just reeling me back in one time, there's a good chance I'm out of this thing for good. Real good chance.
So here's another thing that I've also noticed, and I've kind of just recently started talking about this, and it's the experience of the guy that was on the team that wasn't good enough to start.
Yep.
That gets run off. There's nothing more for them. There's no, again, this goes back to the dissolution of high school seasons. The rotationals, those 10-team tournaments kind of killed the dual meet. They're killed JV teams. So then there's no active JV events. So kids that aren't starting, you quit. You never come back because you can't start. There's no activity for you. You might have 2-3 JV jamborees or something.
Sure.
And I started thinking about this, like I said, relatively recently, with a buddy of mine I went to college with at ODU. And it's like, what if I'd have been run off out of the room, like run off, never to come back? Like, yeah, I was not going to make any impact in my wrestling room as a wrestler. And my coach knew that. So when it came time for me to say, no, this isn't a thing. Granted, I had the newspaper thing that that I was actually working on, working there. But he knew that I was going to, I liked the sport. So he made a point to keep me around. I'd already started announcing anyway. So I was around it, didn't run me off, didn't ruin my taste of, wrestlers are all dirtbags. They just, I wasn't bullied when it came time for me to quit. Like they appreciate, like coach, I think really did a lot of this. Billy Ruff, I got to give him a shout out. Did a good job at saying, no, he's, lay off a Twinkie. My nickname growing up really also didn't help with the toughness of the sport. I have a story about my
Dang it.
first match that I've said before. But again, like that kid that's not good for your. I don't want to say he's not good for your room. He's probably not even a good enough workout partner. Find a role for them. Find a broadcast. Make him a PA announcer. Make him the statistician. You got a phone. Start a podcast. Like there are so many ways you can get those fringe kids that really probably aren't cut out for the sport to still stick around the sport and fall in love with it. Although I don't know if this world needs like 3,000 more me's running around. You actually, right? You've got some wrestling chops. I didn't. So, but those
but
are
no, we can
valuable.
use
So
that. We can.
don't
We
run
can
don't
use
run
that.
kids off. That's another thing we got to do. We got to keep those people that aren't in the lineup involved in the sport. So now we've got another problem is retention. And then so we're if we have a team of 14 kids, you're only putting out 14 wrestlers every generation. That doesn't help our numbers. You need a room of 50 and 45 of them really having a positive experience. And you know that 30 of them aren't going to be starters. How do you keep them involved? I think that's another puzzle that, once somebody just quits and I can't start, I quit. You didn't give them a good experience. You got to find ways to get them more matches or, something that keeps them involved as a team too. That's one thing that I think at like a Division III level, like the up in New England, they have a futures tournament. Like these large D3 roster teams, they have a tournament at the end of the year for basically your non-starters. They call it the futures. So even their college guys have an opportunity, and then B teams and stuff. So there's the formation of our schedule and our structures. I think they can also go back to keeping the kids in the rooms, giving them the activity of being there, being part of a team, and also. And if those kids aren't there, like, the me's of the world, keep them involved somehow. There's something you can always do with your program to give that, let's call it what it is, give that quitter right here a positive experience. So all of those things, I think, factor into that initial question about what do we got to do to keep people, get half of them. I think, because I think if we're only keeping the 14 that graduate out of the starting lineup, that's not
And
a
that might be generous, by the way. That might be generous,
say if
man.
you got 14 four seniors. I mean, it just depends. I mean, you're going to have 14.
Right.
You're supposed to, because our forfeit date, forfeits. That's another thing. That's another story entirely. But I think those are some things: the weight cutting, the structure, the way that another side tangent. I'm the Virginia Duels a couple weeks ago. Back home, it's my wrestling club, the Peninsula Wrestling Association, that's run the Virginia Duels for 44 years. We had some snow threats. In Virginia, it's the southeast of snow. It's the threat of snow, you're off of school. Not like here on Wednesday when it was 20 below. Okay, you're off of school. So we're trying to I'm calling the PIAA to make sure our bracketing format it hits with their points totals, because what happened is all those rotationals ruined it for, you get kids having 100 matches by the time they're a sophomore. How many matches did you have your senior year, Mike?
21 going into the postseason.
Okay, and Jersey has a limit. You're only allowed
22.
Right?
Yeah, so it was 22. I remember I had one less than the limit. Yeah.
Yeah, my high school teammate Mike Akers was a 4-time state champ. He was ranked number 1 in the country. Fargo runner-up to Cliff Moore in '97. Like wrestled at Virginia Tech, national qualifier. Jeremy Hunter whipped his ass the first round, but that's another story entirely. But look, he was 25-6 as a freshman, so 31 matches, and then maybe he broke 100 wins. I think the end of his junior year or the beginning of his senior year. So like again, now we've got we've seen some of these guys with like you talk about your reps. You're going to burn out all your reps. Like, Alabama, you can wrestle 7th and 8th grade. Minnesota, 7th and 8th grade. The kids winning 300 and some high school matches, or even, 100 wins used to be a thing. 150 was like, wow, man, but now you're seeing 150 and 80 career records. You're like, that's, good, but
it's a lot.
But like, back to how many reps do you get? Are you burning out before then? You're burning out in high school. You're burning out in middle school. Like, I think our match limits are too much. Oh, you need mat time. I'm a big proponent of practice, because practice can be fun. You learn at practice. I don't know a whole lot about the inner workings of how Kale runs his practice room, but everybody says, yeah, it's fun. It's a lot of just play wrestling. I mean, you go in and it's apparently fun. The club wrestling for me in the off season when I was learning was fun. Okay, I'm learning an ankle lace. They hurt. So I don't want to do that again. Like, but it's like just simple things to keep it involved with fun, I guess. Wrestling's hard. And another thing too, as a tubby kid growing up, the flipping singlet. Okay. I don't want to hear people say it's not tough enough to wear the singlet. You don't need to be wrestling.
Gotta go. It's gotta go.
I would have probably wanted to be in the sport earlier. I'd seen it. It's not like
Yeah.
I had never seen wrestling. I never went to a match until I was a sophomore in high school, but I'd seen wrestling. I'd walk through
Sure.
the gyms and be, oh, I'm not going to wear that. And I'm that kid that's in the, if I would have been wrestling at that age, I'd have been like novice 90 plus plus plus. I'm
Sure.
that kid.
Sure.
Okay. I'm not
Gotcha.
bulging out of everything, but I was definitely 100
Hefty.
in the third grade. Okay.
Sure.
Definitely like, I'm not, I don't, that is a detriment to the self-conscious teenager. I think if you're under 7 or 8, you don't really care. Like my
No,
niece
no.
kid, Archer, just started wrestling at 5, loves it, doesn't care about what he's wearing. You get
Right.
that first year kid at 12 that's going through puberty. It's awkward.
Yeah, it's weird.
And it's not
It's
fun.
weird.
That's
I don't know why
thing.
why are we married to it? Why are we married to the singlet? It drives me absolutely bananas. And here's
Again, well, if you ain't tough enough to wear the single, you ain't tough enough.
Nah,
I don't believe there
I
is
don't know.
people are
I
not
don't know
inherently
if it's
tough.
that.
There's a small group of people that are
Yeah.
born tough. You
Right.
have to learn to be tough. You have to be put into some crap to learn how to be tough. Not
Mhm.
everybody is going to be tough after getting beat in the face for the first time.
For sure.
That's where, your tail's between your leg walking out of the restroom. You may not come back. Or if you lose a big match, what do we talk about? The car ride home.
Yeah.
That's the worst part of youth sports, the car ride home.
Yeah.
So I think taking any barrier to entry away from our sport is a good thing. If we can find any, like you're saying, and talk about the scales, and I want to talk that thing I thought was an amazing thing, because what you will have is data. You will have hard data. You will not have like, oh, well, we should do this. Like right now, we don't have any data about attendance if we take a team score away at the NCAA championships. You're going to make a change to how wrestling events are done, and you're going to have data behind it. You're also going to see how the kids are performing. Are they performing? Are injury rates going to go down? You're going to have hard data, and that is knowledge. And that knowledge you can then take. State associations aren't going to change things on whims. They're going to need data, and you're having the data. And that's one thing so far of what we've had. That's the one thing what I'm happy with the P&L to hear about is like, that is next level. That's outside of, that's ahead of the game. That is proactive. That is not reactive.
We're trying, man. And like we all know. So here's the problem. The problem is that we all know what the genuine concerns are, the real the vice points, the bottlenecks in our sport. But I don't think that there's ever been an organization that has been wholeheartedly committed to changing them. Really. I say that from the top to the absolute bottom. I'm talking from the Olympic level. We knew what the problem was. We all knew. We still know. But there's not an organization that is really committed to fixing it. And that can be said for the NCAA wrestling too. Okay? We know what the problem is. The problem is that we're not getting butts in the seats in 85% of the matches. We're not getting butts in the seats for most of the. Now, look, you want to take away Penn State, Rutgers, Iowa, Oklahoma State.
25 teams. I think 25 because I do the attendance. So 25 teams averaged more than 1,000 last year. By comparison, most people know by now that I work NCAA hockey at St. Cloud State. This is a low year for us. This is, we're 11-11 right now as we record this. 18th in the country. There's 64 teams that play Division I hockey. There is no Division II. We are Division II. Well, there's 5, but I don't want to get boiled down the drama.
Semantics, yeah.
So 64 teams. We're a Division II school with Division I hockey. We're averaging about 3,200 a game. That would be what, 5th maybe? D1. We're 24th in college hockey. 24, and we would be near the top 5-10.
Absolutely.
On wrestling.
Absolutely.
And that's with 17 dates. So one thing, to your point, butts and seats, you got a dual meet in November, then you don't have another home meet until
February. I'll take the blur off. You can see my calendar.
Here's what drives, and I do this wrestling newsletter that I've got 1,000 people that subscribe to, but to that, I subscribe to all these RSS feeds of every school in the country. I believe we were in December, and I think it was a dual meet. So-and-so celebrates senior night. I'm like, it's December 13th. You're done with your home schedule a month and a half into the season. And it might've been a small school with, I don't know exactly what it was. A small school. I can tell you that it wasn't a Division I school, but the structure of the schedule. Again, we go back to like the argument with the national duels versus the tournament. I mean, are we what is it, tournament season? Is it dual season? You know, Willie's been beating the drum of a split season for a while. Tennis is doing that in a pilot program where in their individual championships are in the fall and their national champions, which is determined by duels, is in the spring instead of one giant week where it's all done and you've got say your number one singles player playing on the best team, playing 15 matches in a week versus the guys got to play against is, I'm pretty good. So again, we're that's a side tangent, but again, the schedule. What is the format of our season? How do we get butts in the seats? How do we get that first semester kid to come back week after week after week? Basketball, you're home and away, or you're on the road for no more than a week at a time. In our hockey schedule, our conference schedule, the National Collegiate Hockey Conference, on, off, on, off, on, off, home series weekends. How you your non-conference games is up to you. But, it's consistent. It's the schedule. Like, again, our fractured nature of how our colleges are. A Big Ten sets their schedule. Okay. But the Big 12 doesn't set the schedule for all the affiliates. The ACC has, X of 7 schools, 6 schools, 7 schools. Stanford being an ACC is another issue entirely. But okay, they set their schedule, but they all have to wait. Like I said earlier, we have to wait till basketball sets their schedules.
Right.
Maybe getting away from March Madness and basketball entirely. Maybe this split season thing, as again, like tennis is trying to do.
I also think that
there's a lot of moving parts to solve this problem.
I agree, but I think where we start is that there's no gravity for these home events.
Agreed.
There's no gravity. There's no, well, if we win this, then there's nothing to it, right? Like, so I get it. Oklahoma State, Iowa, there is gravity. Whoever wins this gets bragging rights for the next year. Okay. Iowa State, same thing.
Augsburg, Wartburg, even at the lower level.
Awesome. Right. They put butts in seats because there's gravity to the matchup. If there is no rivalry to speak of, right? If South Dakota State is wrestling, give me a Big 12 school that is comparable.
West Virginia.
That's a great one. Okay. If South Dakota State is wrestling West Virginia, what is my incentive for going? What is it? I'm not a West, like, even if I move to South Dakota, which probably not happening because Billings is too chilly for me. But let's say I move there. I'm not a Jackrabbits fan from birth. I'm not a Mountaineer fan. What is? I'll watch it. I'll watch it on TV.
I mean, the one guy from New Jersey, happens to be their head coach. That might be the extent of it.
True story. Yeah, there's not many Jersey guys that make their way out to Billings, but
Brookings. But anyway,
Brookings. Sorry. Yeah,
I let it go once. You didn't get it. Correct you.
Sorry. No, that's fine. But I guess my point is there's no incentive for me to go to that match. Zero. Brave the negative 15-degree weather to go see that match. There's just
there's a Tanner Sloan who comes through. You've got the one guy, the people
fine.
Then he might get a forfeit.
And he's probably going to get a forfeit, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is until we can find a way to have gravity on these matches, I just don't see it changing. Now, you brought up Kale and what they do in their wrestling room and how important it is to them. Why? And again, I don't want you to just speak for Kale. I want you to guess as to why he is against a national duels.
Well, right now he's figured out the formula.
He's got it.
And it doesn't hurt that winning is addictive. And I'm going to bring this back to a non-wrestling solution. Or actually, let's go back to a winning wrestling solution. So when I first showed up to my first match, 15 years old, we're a really, really good school. Deep Creek High School is a dual meet we were wrestling against, a AAA school. We're a AA school. Okay, beat them. Good dual meet. Guy that took me, sat down, okay, 6s for a pin, 5s for a tech fall, 4 for a major, 3 for decision. I got the nuts and bolts of it right there. They win the duel. Now, if we'd have gotten beaten 61-6, I may not have come back. So there's that winning attitude, that winning. Sure. People are attracted to a winner. Good kids are going to be, recruits are going to be attracted to winning teams. So right now, he did the hard part in getting that first one. Then now the good ones are coming to him. He doesn't really have to go very far. He doesn't really have to spend a whole lot of time playing Xbox with David Taylor's living room to get the kid as much as he used to. Sure. Plus, I mean, he's still, we talk about one of the guys that are just, Rushmore of the generation kind of thing. Winning helps. If you could put him at Duquesne when they had a program, but for him to be winning, for him to have all that stuff, he's got to have the resources, he's got to have the money, he's got to have the facilities, he's got to have the things that kids want, he's got to have the things that the parents think the kids need, and then of course he's got proven result. The guy can coach.
Sure.
There is no argument that he is a good coach. Yes, he's got the best guys, but guess what? He's taking guys that are okay. They're blue chippers, but they're also like, oh, he has elevated their game. So the proof of how he does is you can't argue with how good of a coach he is. The methodology, okay, you can look at the Suriano breaking his ankle or whatever it was in that bowl series right before the end of the season. That could be a knock on it. I looked this up yesterday. They haven't gone to the national duels since 2009. He wasn't the coach then. They went to the Virginia duels for 2 years. One of those years, they actually wrestled Michigan. One of those years, they wrestled Oklahoma State. One of those years, Edinburgh beat him. Matt Hill actually, I think, pinned Bubba Jenkins in one of those duels. So we look at, okay, dual meets. Then he looked at what makes his guys healthy. Well, they're not hurt, save the Suriano type of thing. He doesn't have guys that are routinely hurt. So they're not wrestling a grinding schedule. They're having fun. They're healthier. So they're not getting as many weigh-ins. So they're not cutting themselves down. You notice they're not cutting crazy weight either. They may be one guy a year that has a significant pull. I think all that come into why Cale's successful. Now, why is he going to mess with that formula? There's no need to change the formula for him. So if the structure around him changes, no, why do I need to do that? No, I don't. No, we're this is how we do it. This is how I know how to do it. And I don't doubt for a second he's going to, if it ever changed, he would figure it out. But again, he's got to figure it out. He could lose every dual meet he could win a national title with 5 guys. He could have 5 guys and win a national title. But he could lose every dual meet with 5 guys and 5 forfeits.
Sure.
So why he doesn't need to change. Now the sport changing around him, there's going to be resistance there. So as far as why he doesn't compete in a national duels right now, I think the calendar makes sense. They tried his bowl series, which didn't work. Coaches didn't want to wrestle who they wanted to coach. That was another thing too, is no, we're not participating if we don't wrestle. If we wrestle this team, we're out. Come on. That's what annoys me. If we're so big, bad, and tough and any day, anytime wrestling, and then to not want to wrestle somebody because of whatever reason. I mean, I'm not going to, we can go back to the Virginia Tech Iowa thing all we want, but that's one little thing. John didn't like going up to Iowa all the time. I mean, that much is documented. So the way it sits, how it used to be in the season, I get not wanting to be in a national duels because it's a grind. We moved it. It used to be a week later. And that's where the Big Ten coach is like, we're getting beat up before we go to the Big Ten schedule. So they moved it back another weekend. And now it's, we're getting beat up again. You learn that these coaches don't like 3 matches in a day. Quads are gone at the Division I level unless it's SoCon type stuff. No offense to those. But Big Ten schools are not having quads. Just not happening anymore. So I think a lot of back to the Cale thing. Again, I think it's all different parts lumped in together. If there's a national dual meet championships and it's mandated by the NCAA, he'll participate. But right now it's optional. He doesn't have to. He doesn't need to. He doesn't feel the need to put his team through that. Now, if it's in November and he's going to the Black Knight Invitational instead of whatever, you can make your own assumptions there. We haven't crossed that bridge yet. So I think he'll event if we have this National Duels Invitational and it sticks more than 1 year. I think he might give it a shot because he's gone to the collegiate duels. I don't think he's afraid of competition by anything.
No,
I think it's
that's not. I'm not calling him.
No, I don't think he's calling him out. No, I'm not putting your words in your mouth either. I don't think that's the thing at all. I just think he doesn't need to. He's got the formula figured out. He knows how to win a national title with the format he's got. He knows exactly how many people he needs to win. He knows the depth he needs to have. And the only thing now I think is he's already set the points record. Now he's just got to go chase J-Rob's 10 All-Americans thing. I think that's the next possible thing. And then how many titles Gable's won. So the guy's going to.
By the way, Jared Lawrence is freaking out this year. Like last year, I sat with him at the NCAA tournament, and Jared Lawrence. For those of you that don't know, Jared Lawrence was on that team when they had 10 All-Americans, won a national title with no champs, and he was
no finalists either.
No finalists, right? Yeah. No champs, no finalists. But here's the funny thing to me. He's rooting against Braden Davis. He's rooting against, and I'm like, come on, man.
Jory Volk was his kid, though. There's plausible deniability there. Jory Volk, who beat Davis, was his kid. He's a Pinnacle kid.
And that was actually,
that was a blood round.
it was a big win for him.
Mac
Like, he was
Ryder also
fired
told
up.
me the same thing. Mac Ryder goes, I'm double fisting when we're popping the champagne now. He's double fisting.
Yeah. Look, I got to
It's the
tell
whole
you, I don't.
1972 Miami Dolphins thing with them.
Right. I got to tell you though, you know, it it bugged me, man. It bugs me because here's everything you said about Kale and how he has figured out the secret sauce to winning at the highest level of NCAA wrestling. No one's going to argue that, nor are they going to ask him to change for the sake of change. But here's my real gripe. My gripe is that we as a culture know and say things like we have to grow the sport, right? And now, while I have never heard that term come out of Kale's mouth, I have heard similar things like, yeah, the sport could use this, the sport could use that. We all kind of know that if we want to get past this dark time that is probably coming ahead, that we need something new. And if we're not all behind it, all of us, especially him, he knows he moves the needle. He knows he does. That's where I have a real qualm with it. That's where I have a real problem with it. Because you have the ability to move the needle just by appearing. Literally just, honest to goodness.
That's proof because, again, he's gone out to Utah Valley. He's gone to Sacred Heart. He's had these dual meets at small places. Yes, guess what? Back to the attendance. Who's the biggest? They're two of the biggest draws in wrestling. Penn State away and Iowa away. Every school that brings them in will set an attendance record. Nebraska just set an attendance record with Penn State last week. Mm-hmm. Iowa State might be the exception because of the Cy-Hawk being what it is. Oklahoma State now is drawing big crowds as a road duels, but then their home crowds have never been super stellar.
No, that's agreed.
Again, you talk about moving the needle. Yes, when Penn State shows up, people are going to show up to watch Penn State. And that's the one thing I remember when Steve Martin was talking. He was like, yeah, I could bring Penn State in here, but why do I want to do that to my guys? Like, they're going to just get mudholed and we're going to get embarrassed in front of our home crowd. He didn't want to do that.
Yeah, it's not worth the extra.
I'm not going to bring them in for the sake of a big crowd.
Yeah, agreed. All right.
I'd be
Joel,
curious to take one step back there of, we talked about gravity and the gravity that, Penn State brings when they go on the road. What do you guys think are some strategies that a high school program could implement to start to build some gravity around their events and get some fans showing up to their events?
Can I start here real quick? I'm sorry. Let me
ahead.
Start. The fact that California doesn't have a dual meet state championship is bothersome, right? Like, it doesn't have to be huge. Like, that's the other thing. Like, everyone wants to be inclusive. Well, how about we just take one team from every section and just wrestle them on a weekend? Like, the one team that overperforms, whatever. Or maybe it's just invitation only, right? But the fact that there isn't one and there's no gravity, like for little dual meets, I think that's a big miss by us. But go ahead, Jay.
I think the key is consistency, and this goes back to the way the sport is structured. Are we a tournament sport? Are we a dual sport? Are we an individual sport? Are we a team sport? I remember, like, the schedule. Every Wednesday night we had a dual meet. Mm-hmm. And then Friday, Saturday, we were either at a tournament, which we had the Northern Virginia tournament, and then we had like a Christmas tournament. Those were the two tournaments that weren't the postseason. Dual meet tournament, the Virginia duels. Dual meet quad or a tri on the weekends. That was like, I think we had 13 dual meets my senior year. We're ranked 24th in the country. So something worked there, but then the gym was full. Then you have the big duel. Like Mike Akers, who I mentioned earlier, he defeated a guy named Bobby Ingram, who at the time was a two-time undefeated AAA state champion going for his third title. Akers was a senior, Ingram was a junior. The gym was full. Matt Light on TV. Mm-hmm. Akers beat Ingram in the draw. Granted, we got beat 49-12, but the whole Hampton Roads area was keyed on that one match. It was Ingram's first high school loss. A week later, number 3 Great Bridge comes in, and it's 32-22. Victor Jackson's first match at Pocosin beats the returning state champ from Great Bridge on TV for the Seafood Cup. I'm announcing we got the mat light, we got music. It's got to be an event. Again, find the kid that you're trying to run off. Don't find the band dork that's got the access to the AV closet and put him in with the kid to be the PA announcer, or find a parent that may have done this. So like, go hire a DJ, do something, like make it an event and then do that consistently. This is the two podcasts. Mike, why your podcast is successful? Because it's consistent. It's consistent. You can sit there and you know when it's going to happen. When does college football get played? Take ESPN's Maction out of the situation. Saturdays. When's high school football played? Fridays. When's high school basketball? Fridays. Right. Wrestling in Minnesota apparently is a Thursday thing. In Virginia, it was a Wednesday thing. Consistency. You can't just have one duel a month and it be like, okay, it's a Thursday here, it's a Friday here. You got to have a consistent schedule. Get back to the dual meet. Get back to the JV matches before the dual meet, so you double the amount of your own parents. Rivalries. Harness that neighborhood rival. I can only imagine what a Buchanan and Clovis duel looks like.
It's happening tonight.
Yeah.
It's happening tonight.
Is it really?
It's literally happening tonight. Willie and I are going back and forth on it right now. Awesome. But here's more to your point. They call it the big one. It is literally on their schedule. It says the big one. That's big. We know, okay, I can read that. And I don't have to have the smoke machines, and I don't have to have the tunnel, and I don't have to have 10,000 people, 4,000, probably 2,000 people in the stands, okay, to figure it out. I see in print, bold print, the big one. Got it.
What high school did you go to again?
Edison High School.
What was their main rival?
JP Stevens, Crosstown Rivals. Okay. I'll never forget, like, that was the one that all the alumni would come to. Right? Why? Because my coach, when I first started, my head coach, his name was Ken Pagash, old school Texas guy, only had 9 fingers, never told us how he lost his other one. It had hands like granite. He would smack you in the head. Every time you ask him how he lost his finger, he'd have a different story for you. Well, I was teaching I was teaching a butt drag one day, and never mind. But the point is, though,
that's not how you want to lose a finger, dude.
Look, man, what are you gonna do? Sometimes you lose a watch, sometimes you lose a finger. But here's the thing, okay? I'll never forget my freshman year when he was still the head coach. And I don't know if this would fly now, but he said, listen, you had better all beat their asses now, because you're probably going to be working for them when you're my age. Because it was like the higher end part of it.
What are those old movies? Was it The Best of Times is another one, even this Days to Confuse. You're like, hey, you still mad? I made all district over you. That type of trash talk continues for decades afterwards. And that's local rivalries. It's one of those things like with college sports that drives me nuts. My alma mater was in a really crap. If you're working, you're going to have arguments with the VCU grad, the JMU grad, and the Richmond grad. You're not having arguments with the UTEP grad because they don't live in Hampton Roads. Again, the breaking down of the local rivalries has kind of fractured sports from all the way down to the high school to the college level. But again, to the high school thing, the dual meet, I say New Jersey, and this, you went through there, but I think New Jersey has the best format for a high school wrestling situation, because you've got your one state tournament and you've got your privates and publics, take your boarding schools, your players out of it. But, your parochial schools are there. So, and you've got I think it's 6 dual meet champion classes now. So 4 public, something like that, yeah. Or is it 6 publics and 2 parochial? So you take that whole private school versus public school, you're wrestling against like schools, similar schools. That is it. Usually it's the sizes or neighborhoods. Jersey is, again, compact. So you've got, it's not that far to go anywhere. It's not like 6 hours for a dual meet out in Montana. But again, you've got that local rivalry. A dual meet is, like schools, then your crap kid who is going to go 0-2 at the regional or the districts, he's going to be part of that team. So again, the dual meet, the small schools against each other. And then you go, who's the best man? Get into our back sport of wrestling, any size, doesn't matter, the school. Boom, you do it in New Jersey. I think that's the best way to do a state tournament, is you have your classes for schools that are pair them up, because that makes a difference. Doesn't make a difference with your stud, one kid. Your one kid can go to BFE high school, or he can go to the Giant high school. That little guy can still beat that guy. But at a team, 4,000 kids to choose from versus 400 to choose from, there's a competitive disparity there, no matter how good of a coach you are. So I think the dual meet championships, your state doesn't have one, you should have one. College, I think, should have one. Those are the things I think. And then make the schedule. Are you going to be here? Again, keeping your kids involved too. All of those things, if they could just be figured out, I think we're back to the chicken and the egg. Yeah. Who's going to solve it? What organization's going to solve it? What state association's got it right? Which one's going to know we do this? Like Jersey, I've never been to New Jersey State tournament. I hear it's wild. I've been to the PIAA tournament. That's a big party. I've been to the duels. Not so crazy, but it's like weird. Like why the duels don't draw because there's so much. I think the big draw with these state tournaments isn't necessarily the what's on the mat. I think it's the seeing your buddies outside. It's it's the world's biggest wrestling's frat party. It's our Mardi Gras. So, and you do that 50 times across 50 states. So, I don't think everything's always about, we want to go to watch the finals. Yeah, you're going to go watch the finals, but what are you doing before the finals? What are you doing after each session of the finals? Let's not kid ourselves. We're social beings.
Sure.
When we admit that, we're going to the NCAAs to hang out with our friends and watch wrestling, not in that order.
Yeah.
We'll identify ourselves as a little bit of the culprits. Why? It's like, nobody of my team's not going to win the team title. I'm not going to go. No, you're still going to go because you've been going for 30 years.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, and with all this talk, Matthew Ciampa is listening to this, and he is cursing at his radio because he is and he texted me, and Matt, I'm sorry, I will get back to you, Coach. He texted me the last time. I don't even remember, Joel, who we had on, but we were singing the praises of the dual meet championship, and he literally said to me, he's like, "Can you please have me back on to argue against a dual meet national championship?" And I will. I'd
love to hear that point, because again, I don't like to just do a small thing like with the NCAA championships. The argument is it's the best. It's not broken. You don't need to fix what's not broken. Well, again, why are people going to the Division I championships? We have one tournament event. The Big Ten draws okay. So all the hundreds of tournaments we have in college wrestling each year, how many draw actual tangible fans? 1.5. Big 12. Okay, so now 3. So 2.5. The Big 12, Big 10.
They don't fill the BOK Center.
No, they don't fill it, but I'd say tangible being 5,000 or more. The Scuffle doesn't draw that for the finals. The Midland sure as heck doesn't draw that for the finals. You combine all the tickets sold. Yeah, it looks impressive, but we go once. CKLV is the best freaking tournament on the planet, and you can literally stand next to Mad Murray and watch. I was literally Matt side when Jordan Burroughs wrestled Jordan Lean that year. And I'm like, I'm not Matt's side. I'm in the middle of the 4 match next to Joe Williamson. Like, we're watching, like, what is going, like, that doesn't, I can't do that at nationals. Nobody can do that at nationals.
You can't do that. You certainly can't do that at the March Madness. You can't do that. You're not getting floor seats. It's wild. But okay, we are butting up to time here, Jason Bryant. So we're going to run through our sprint. And I know you know the deal. Don't think, just answer. In your infinite wrestling experience, what is the best wrestling shoe of all time?
See, you got a guy that didn't wrestle very long, so I have to go to an experience. And I haven't listened to the show quite frequently. I was prepared for this.
Okay.
It's the Adidas Teal Combat Speeds. Why? Because to me, that was the first wrestling shoe I actually noticed. You got the black ones with the pink sole. The first pair I wore, I borrowed from a guy named Jimmy Jones. They were the black and pink, hot pink Asics. And I got pinned in about a minute and a half. A guy named Andre. I don't like those shoes.
Forget those shoes.
I can't remember which one of the guys for Coast had it, or I saw it from, but it was that teal with the yellow striping. And I own a pair now. I own a pair because I felt like I needed to have that wrestling shoe. I don't have any tie with Adidas. I did use Blood Rounds promo code to get it, by the way. But the Combat Speeds, I have, I think, 3 or 4 pair. I have the pair that Steve Martin gave me when he was at ODU, a pair of ASIC split second 4s, kind of broken in. The last time I was on the mat was probably 15 years ago. Then I have the Jordan Burroughs 2-pack pair. And then I have Kyle Snyder's autographed pair from Rudis. And then I have the Combat Speeds, which I actually do sometimes put on to wear around the house, because Kevin Claunch from Blood Round says, I wear shoes around the house. I haven't quite gotten into like wear wrestling shoes as like slippers kind of thing. So, but I have the teal combat speeds because to me that's the wrestling shoe. I look at it like that. It's the first one that ever drew my eye to it. And it's just, I think that's an iconic shoe.
It is absolutely iconic. Those teals are absolutely iconic.
I mean, I got it in reach. I can reach over here.
Oh, I want to see them.
All right, what do I got? I'll just grab one.
There you
go. Like I'm not BSing. I told you I got a pair.
There you go.
Like I said, I got old pennants on the wall. I had some combat speeds.
I love it. Beautiful. Okay. You only get 4. Got to be American. Who is it, brother? Tell me who's on your Mount Rushmore of wrestling.
Cale Sanderson.
Mm-hmm.
My generation. That he's 2 months older than I am. He came through. We're the same age. This is the guy of our age. Mm-hmm. Bruce Baumgartner.
Okay.
My first favorite wrestler of all time. Active heavyweight. Big Bruce. Picture him with the Garth Brooks on my wall right now. Number
1992.
3, Jordan Burroughs. Yes. Changed the sport of wrestling when we needed him. And also the first wrestler I take that back. He's the first international wrestler to ever get me choked up while on a broadcast. When he won his first title in Istanbul, I'm on the call with USA Wrestling, and I about lost it at the very end. And then not knowing what he was going to do just kind of makes that moment, on hindsight bigger. So Jordan Burroughs was right there. His career started to take off just as I started doing a lot more international wrestling events. I was thinking about when he was at the non-Olympic Worlds. I'm like, I was so upset that I wasn't there to be on the microphone for, if that was going to be the last time. We still don't know, but it's like, I think I've only not seen like 3 or 4 of his losses in person. So, and I've seen, obviously, how many more wins have I seen in person? So Burroughs is number 3.
Okay.
And again, these are no particular order. Now, number 4 is a near and dear, Gray Simons. And the fact that his name is not on the tip of people's tongues today might be one of my biggest pet peeves. Gray was a 3-time NCAA champion at Lock Haven, late 50s, early 60s, a Granby guy. So he wrestled for Billy Martin Sr., 4-time NAI national champion. So everybody talks about Hasselrig, 6-time. Gray won 7 national titles. He was the first NAI 4-time national championship. He did it at Lock Haven. So he did it at a wrestling school. And his only loss his freshman year was to the returning national champ, Paul Powell from Pitt, who was up, and Gray had to wrestle up a weight because 115 was not a dual meet weight class. Imagine when it was Misic wrestled up to wrestle Rivera. Well, that's Gray's only loss.
Right.
Only one. So, and he made 2 Olympic teams. One of those Olympics, he didn't lose a match, but didn't medal because of the black mark system. He beat multiple world champs and medalists. Like he was 2-0-2 and had a win over the world champ, but didn't medal. Gray as a technician. Now his coaching career doesn't get the he didn't have he had a couple national champs, had one at Tennessee, Indiana State left, and then Tennessee dropped the program on him. He was trying to get guys, and I did a whole podcast series. I'm not quite done with it yet on him called 7, because he's the first,
7 times.
Dan Gable broke his win streak record. Think about that for a second. Like there's guys that come first. I got Dan Hodge, Dan Hodge, SI, signed on my wall right now. But Gray Simons, I'll sit there, and I learned so much wrestling from just going in his office. And he was the coach at Old Dominion when I was there. So I am inherently biased here. But Gray was the guy who told me stories about Doug Bluebaugh. Gray told me stories about Shelby Wilson. Gray told me stories about Port Robertson and Myron Roderick. So the early thing in my history in this sport, when I didn't know jack about it. I remember watching Teague Moore pin David Morgan in the finals. It was the first NCAA finals I watched. That day I'm talking to Gray about it. Is now you need to watch this, and this. And I'm like, I don't know anything about technique. And he goes in and tells stories about these greats that are on his wall. He doesn't talk about himself being great. So that's one thing. He's incredibly humble. He never talked about how great he was. But how many people know there's a 7-time collegiate national champion out there? They know Hasselrig won 6. He won 7. He's the first to do it. So there's something about somebody that sets trends. Like, you make 2 Olympic teams, and this is also in an era where we weren't going to the world championships every year. So he didn't have the opportunity to get all those world medals. He would have. So I am.
That's awesome.
Fairly biased towards Gray Simons, who's at this.
That might be my favorite answer that we've gotten in a long time. That's why we do this, because it's not. Look, if we're all going to do it on one particular metric, then it'll be a specific number and it'll be mine, right? It'll be JB, Kale, John, Dan. Like
Yeah.
that'll be
You know
it.
how hard it is
And
not to put John W on that list?
I understand, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that's probably one of my favorite answers that we've gotten so far.
Gray
So thank
Simons
you.
didn't lose to anybody from Cleveland State.
Fair,
God, I hope
fair.
John doesn't hear that. No.
Mm,
But it was a couple years ago. I remember doing a show with Matt Dern. We did the Rudis show. We did the 75th anniversary team. Gray was not on it, which is just
yeah,
mind blowing to me. Yeah, you've got
right.
several two-timers on there. And then we redid it and re-put, then we did a 90 team because we added, I have to add Stever and those guys. And I was like, and like, who do you eliminate from that 120, that lower weights? And I'm like, I have to eliminate John Smith. He only won 2 national titles. Gray won 3 NCAAs and 4, and then and that was an era where the NAIA it wasn't the NAIA qualified you, it was you had to be your dual affiliate, and the tournaments were open. So he went, and he had to win this to wrestle 123 in dual meets. He had to win a wrestle off every single week to get the start, and he had to beat an All-American every week to do it.
Unreal. That is great. I learned a bunch. All right, last question. Oh no, we got a couple more. Let's do this one next. Give us a book that you're reading right now that you think our audience would benefit from.
The book I'm reading right now is a wrestling book, and I think your audience, as keyed up into wrestling as they are, would get a lot of this. It's called Mat Return. A guy named Ron Lang sent it to me, and a lot of it is very basic entry-level storytelling stuff. But it's also like, as somebody who likes history, there's stories from people in here that I didn't know. So, I still haven't finished it. He sent it to me back in April, and I'm a terrible reader. I've been doing more of the audiobooks, but it's just called Mat Return, and it's got some history of the stories. Some of the things you're like, oh, the rules, I remember this. It's a lot. One of your readers be like, if they know a lot about wrestling, they might think they might think they know more than this, but it's the stories in there. There were stories. I was like, I can't remember who it was, but it was like reading Matt Snacks with Jack Smith time and see, oh, Pritz is in here, stuff like that. So there's a lot of that little nuggets of information in there about people and then the stories about people you don't know, and that's what I like about it. So I think any wrestling fan would like, and I want to say it's an entry level type of book, but it isn't, because the junkie like me gets something out of it, but it's also great for your 14-year-old kid who knows nothing about wrestling, who likes wrestling. So I think it checks both boxes.
Love it. That's a great one. Okay. You get a magic wand. You get to change one thing about the sport of wrestling, and it changes tomorrow. What would it be, Jason Bryant?
I waffled over this one. I gave this a lot of thought. I've been thinking about this one for like 2 weeks, man. Nice. Just because I don't know which. I wish I could put a rider, like in Congress. I could put an addendum like, okay, we're going to add this to it. So I'll tell you which two I'm waffling between.
Okay.
Then I will go off on what I pick.
Fair.
First one is weight classes at the Olympics. Back to some sanity. Give us 10 for each style, like we do the Worlds. I love the Olympic Games. You go to. I've been to 4 of them. I've been fortunate enough to call 3 of them. So there's that. Then there's the bleeding heart wrestling altruism that I feel like we would be better, kind of the crux of all this. And based on our conversation today, this is the answer I'm going to go with, because I feel like we need to do better as a whole. And this is going to come off preachy. It's going to come off probably somewhat smug, but it's for the American collegiate wrestling fan to pay attention and be a fan of more than just 25 Division I programs. Those are it's the Big Ten, the good ones in the Big 12, a couple in the ACC, and every now and then when a Pac-12 team gets hot, and then there's Little Rock's a great story, for example, but you weren't paying attention to them until Nasir Bailey and Stephen Little got on the podium.
Sure.
You don't care about Battle of the Bergs. You should. You don't care about Johnson and Wales versus Rhode Island College selling out a gym. Like every ad of a new program is something for your kids to potentially attend and your coaches to potentially come from. And that could be a junior college in New Jersey. They've added a couple there. It could be a Division II school in Alabama. College basketball fans in mass, for example, there's 370 some odd D1 schools. When it comes to March Madness, you're looking up who the heck Northern Kentucky is playing in the Ohio Valley Conference tournament. You know who Valparaiso is because Bryce Drew hit a 3-pointer to knock somebody off 15 years ago. I remember when Northern Iowa beat Missouri in the first round of the NCAA basketball tournament back in like 91, 92. You know those things. Why can't we pay attention to just more of just, oh, I only care about the best. Following
Hold on. Do you think that the the disparity between Division One and everyone else has grown in the last the chasm between Division One wrestlers and everyone else has grown in the last 20 years?
I think it's had to because there's a lot less, going back to your time in junior college, those
Mhm.
junior college kids you're not stashing the TJ Williams at Lassen anymore.
Mhm.
D1 schools are not going to take chances on the APR hit.
Mhm.
So you're not going to stash your questionable kid in JUCO. You may stash him now with NIL. You may put him at, Notre Dame College closed down. I mean, Isaiah White
Mhm.
started out there.
Right.
You might stash him somewhere in a Division II school for a minute to try to get him. But your guys that are coming out, the dream is to be Division I. And I get into this argument all the time about, the lower division should be able to go. No, if you want to be a Division I champion, you got to go to Division I school. That's the first choice
Mhm.
you have to make. The disparity is always there because the best are going to want to chase that dream.
Sure.
Now, then you have your Tervel Delagnavs, who was third in
Mhm.
high school coming out. And then if he'd have gone to a Division I room right out of the bat, I don't know if he has the
Very
career
fair.
he
Sure.
developed because he also had an opportunity to get coached. He wasn't
Mhm.
there to step in and, okay, you need to step up and win this Big Ten duel. He could
Mhm.
develop. He could learn wrestling. He could
Sure.
have fun. It wasn't a
Right.
job. Division II has a gap between Christmas and New Year's. They can't compete at all. It's
Right.
not a job in outside of Division I. So
Sure.
yes, there is a talent disparity. I
Do you,
think
but and so if we just
your
agree,
hammer could win matches. Absolutely could qualify, win matches. But
but hold on though. I guess the point that I'm trying to make is if we agree then that there is a chasm in between Division One and everyone else, and it also coincides, and that chasm has gotten bigger in the last 20 years, and it also coincides with the attendance of of record, right? Like it's the upward trajectory of people watching. Does it not make sense that the only thing that they have paid attention to is just those 25 teams in the Division One ranks?
part of that could be what teams are being covered by our limited media too.
Fair
We're
enough.
like
Fair enough.
Blair Academy and Wyoming Seminary, for example, to draw a high school comparison, that does not resemble 99% of high school wrestling. Those
Agreed.
two,
100%.
like those top five do not resemble the rest of high school wrestling. Whereas,
True.
okay, I only want to watch the best. This is the same fan that doesn't go watch Iowa wrestle Michigan State, but they'll wait for Oklahoma State to come in. So
Sure.
I want, like I said, to answer the question, I want you to be a wrestling fan, not
Right.
just an Iowa wrestling fan, not just a Penn State wrestling fan, not just
Sure.
a Oklahoma State wrestling fan. I want the Oklahoma State fans to know what the heck's going on when Central Oklahoma was in a barn burner of a dual meet with St. Cloud State in the Division II National Finals. That was one of the best dual meets of the year. UCO was up 16-0. And then we get to 157. What happens? The 157 from St. Cloud beats the returning national champion in overtime. St. Cloud wins the last 6 to win the dual meet and an 8. I mean, that is like high drama duel right there. Oh no, we're
Right.
down and we get a guy gets decked. Oh no, returning champ,
Yeah.
this return to the final, like that drama.
Yeah.
I feel like that's what I want. Like I watched that. Granted, I'm biased here because I announced at St. Cloud State, but like Augsburg and Wartburg has been like that before I even announced the Division III National. So it's like as a sports fan, before I was a wrestling fan, that's where I think we were so less insular, where we're like, you're a fan of sports, so you should appreciate the upset. You should appreciate why chaos is good. And you have chaos at the Division III Nationals. You have chaos at the NAIs. You see one seeds get beat. There's a 15 seed that won the NAIA championships last year. Like, just there are great stories that it doesn't have to be good wrestling. Matter of fact, some of the best wrestling at the NCAA finals, some of the best guys have the most boring matches. I mean,
100%. I agree with that.
Let's just, like, if you watch it for the competitive aspect, not because I feel like it's kind of almost technique snobbery. And now you know your technique. You can look at me like, that's not a great match. That's not a great match. But you know what? What if it's 16-15, each guy's got each other on the back and the crowds are all into it? Doesn't matter how clean the technique is. It's exciting. So I feel like if more people paid attention to a couple more teams, not just 330 more, a couple more teams locally. Like I use Iowa as an example because, there's a bunch of D3s in Iowa. Cedar Rapids. I mean, Loris and Co College was on Iowa Public Television last night. Those are two schools in population centers that people drive past them to go to Iowa dual meets. They drive past them to go to Ames. Right. Stop in and watch them, man. That's the thing. We can, one other fan. No, plus that's also accessible for your kids. And those are the guys that are going to be coaching your kids. Because, no offense, Mike, like, you were not a Division I All-American, but guess what? You love the sport. You're coaching kids.
For sure.
Granted, you've got a Stephen Neal.
There is that. We do get that. So
you've got the world champ, but thing is, for every world champ, you got how many AUs? Right. Like how many guys love the sport of wrestling that wrestled and coached and just give to it. So there's a ton of guys that are coaching. So that is where the value to me in the small colleges, it's how exciting it is. Don't get hung up on, it's not good wrestling. If it's not good wrestling, you don't ever want to watch a high school wrestling match ever again. Because 8 years better than that. So don't give me that. Yeah, so that is kind of my plea. It's more of a magic wand, but it's also my plea. Let's try to be more accepting of every level of wrestling because that's where the growth is. I know, we need more D1s. You're not going to show up anyway. So why do you want Syracuse to have a team back? Why don't you start show you can support a team before you want a big one, I guess is another lesson. So
support every
plug. So support as many teams as you can. Like pay attention to the D3 rankings, the D2 rankings. You're going to see kids. I remember that kid. If you just open your eyes a little bit.
Yeah. Support every level and every format, Kale. Anyway. All right.
Is that you're just going to drop it right there? You're going to mic drop it right there?
Come on. He has my number.
You're going to go dirty jers on that. You're going to
Dude, he can call me. He can call me. He can come on this podcast. I invite him every year. Joel and I talk him.
I got one question I want to spin to you.
Sure.
There's sometimes your phone rings and, you see it come up and it pops up. The one person that you will drop everything for, you could be parasailing in Hawaii. You could be at the altar. If your phone rang, the one person in wrestling, not like a family member, like one person wrestling, who are you answering if that phone?
W.
So what?
John W.
Okay. Great answer.
So I'll give you, obviously he doesn't call me very often. And I have two stories about it. Okay. First one, my son has always loved gadgets and I think he was 2 years old and he was playing around on my phone and he called John W. Smith. And I'm looking at it. I'm like, you're not really, oh my God, coach, I'm so sorry. My son, he's like, no, it's fine. I was having a good conversation with him. Now I hang up the phone and I proceed to tell my wife, our son just burned my one phone call a year, but the only other time he did call was 2016. We were in Madison Square Garden, 2016.
Yeah, that was my first D1s on the mic.
Okay, calls me up. He's like, "Hey, you have a club down here somewhere, don't you?" I'm like, "Yeah, well, we're about 40 minutes south of here of NCAA's this year, but yeah." He's like, "Were you coming up to Madison Square Garden?" I'm like, "Yeah, I planned on. I got tickets. I'm working the event. Blah blah blah." He goes, "You got one of them pedal bikes?" I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Well, like the Airdynes." I'm like, "Did you just call it a pedal bike?" I didn't say that, of course, but I'm like, "Yeah, I got one." He's like, "Yeah, we're gonna need that. We're out one, and ours broke. Can you bring that up?" I go, "Coach, I'm taking the train in, bud." I'm like, "You want me to get on the train, NJ Transit, and go into Penn Station with a pedal bike?" He's like, "Could you?" I'm like, "Yes, I can." So here I was walking down 34th Street to the New Yorker with a pedal bike on my shoulder.
Not the weirdest thing to walk by the New Yorker on 34th Street either.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. I mean, you never know what you're going to see there.
Yeah, New Yorker is a place for sure. Anyway, all right. Jason Bryant, thank you so much for coming on. It was an absolute blast. I learned a ton. Gray Simons especially, but I learned a ton on this podcast.
Yeah, dig in on Gray. I
will.
You're going to uncork some stuff. Like I said, I got a podcast for the part of the Etched in Stone series from National Wrestling Hall of Fame. I've got 6 episodes. I still got 1 left to finish. I got to finish the end of his coaching career, but a lot of stuff in those early years from guys like Freddie Powell, national champs, and Jack Day, teammates and stuff, talking about those early Lock Haven years, talking about wrestling under Billy Martin and all the Martins that had something to do with them too. He's an old school Granby guy, won 1 high school state title, and one year there were 5 Granby high school guys in his bracket at the NCAAs. So a lot of stuff about Gray there.
Awesome, man. Thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate it. Let's just plug away. Tell people where they can find you, what you want them to subscribe to.
Yeah, so I'm at mattalkonline.com. That has been the website since 1997, actually, in a couple iterations. That's where the Matt Talk Podcast Network is. So several shows that are on it. It's had up to 20 shows at a time. It's short times on there. We've got Blood Round. We got the Intermat Show. We got a bunch of other shows. Purdue, NC State. They're all clients as part of the network, mattalkonline.com. So you can also find Matt Talk, search Matt Talk Podcast Network on Spotify, Apple iTunes. I use Overcast personally. And then I've got a newsletter that's I've moved over to Substack. It's just mattalkonline.substack.com. I do a daily wrestling newsletter. And I say daily, it's about 5 to 6 days a week because I actually have, somewhat of a life that I need to do things on weekends too. So you get the highlights, the press releases, but stories. I scour the web for news from around the world. Matter of fact, the obviously the big one the day before we record this was about the National Duels Invitational, but there's also information about India having issues with going to the ranking series in Zagreb. I dig up stuff from international stuff, high school stories from around the country. So this is it. It's free to sign up, but I also have a premium option if you want to get the extra stuff where I will look at Division I stats and facts and figures and come up with stuff that you just can't get anywhere else. So that's at mattalkonline.substack.com. Those of you that read Substack, you kind of know it's got an app. It's delivered right to you 6 o'clock every morning. So that is those are the 2 things I really do. I spend a lot of time on that newsletter because it's part of that answer, because you're going to read this. You're going to read about the University of Indianapolis by default. You're going to read about Johnson and Wales. You're going to read about some high school in South Dakota that's got this kid going for a 5th state title. You're going to read about all that type of stuff in the newsletter. It's a wrestling junkie's dream. Tim Johnson says if he gets it before his devotionals come in, he goes wrestling devotional first. So there you go. Highest of praise, right? That is pretty high praise there for Mr. Johnson. Awesome. Also, thank you. Like this show, there's a podcast section, wrestling podcast variant. Boom, just the Spotify links right there. You can play it right from the app, right from the newsletter. You can listen to the Athletor. Kyler Sanderson will be in there when you released it today. That'll be in there tomorrow morning's podcast. Well, of course, by the time you listen to this, it's a couple days ago, but there it is. You get the point. Either way, thank you very much for coming on and spend some time with us, brother. Appreciate it, man, because this could have gone all day if we didn't have how long are you going to go, man? Appreciate you, brother. Talk soon. Wait. Don't go anywhere before you hit that next button. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, do us a huge favor. Click that subscribe button. And if you're so inclined, leave a review and share it.